Please welcome back to the stage the hosts of Guy in a Cube and your hosts for this morning's keynote, Adam Saxton and Patrick LeBlanc.
Yo! What's up, everyone? How are you this morning? Oh my gosh. We're here. Welcome to day 3 of the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so I want to ask you all a question. At the first keynote, we asked you to go meet someone. We asked you to have dinner with a stranger, lunch with a stranger, breakfast with a stranger. Who did that? Who met someone? Who's out there networking? Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Excellent. Patrick, what did you see over the last 2 days?
So I saw data. I saw zeros and ones. Zeros and ones everywhere, Adam. No, I kid. So the main 2 topics I saw was a lot of focus around security and artificial intelligence. All the co-pilots, all the open AI, everywhere.
We had a lot of great discussions also around just simplifying things, bringing things together, which is what Microsoft Fabric is all about, but also helping by way of doing that to reduce costs for organizations, which is so important.
So important.
And then we also ended it yesterday with the Power Hour. How many went to the Power Hour?
Woo! Power Hour was amazing.
Such energy, laughter. You didn't learn anything, but it was a good time, right?
What about the attendee party? How many people
attended? The attendee party
was so fun. It was so fun.
I saw lots of things with Elvis.
Yeah.
It was great. We're in Vegas.
It was great.
All right. So look, we're entering this 4th industrial revolution, right? Data is the fuel of organizations that are coming about.
And that's why it's so important that organizations do more than just collect and harness data. They need to focus on creating and building a data-driven culture.
Data-driven culture is so important. Right? We see it every day with the companies that we work with, right?
Yeah.
You have to do that. And we are in that spot where it will lead us into it. So with that, we are going to look at this next keynote is going to have discussions around taking that data-driven culture and how do we innovate around those things? How do we leverage partners and ISVs and leverage the data that we have with Microsoft Fabric, with other technologies? It's going to be great, right?
Yeah.
We are going to be led here with Jessica Hawk, who is the Corporate Vice President for Data, AI, and Digital Applications, and she's going to be joined with leaders from EY, PwC, Capgemini, and Prophecy. They're going to have a great discussion. I'm very excited about it.
Okay, Adam, enough of all this talking. It's time to bring out Jessica. Let's welcome Jessica to the stage.
All right.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, did they mention my fingernails? Did y'all talk about my nails? When I arrived in Vegas a few days ago as we were getting ready to kick this thing off, my fingernails did not look like this. But when we brought Fabric to public preview at Build last year, and then when we GA'd it at Ignite, I did my nails just to match the swag color. And when I showed up here on, was it Monday? And people were like, what's with the nails? Get over there. And so I dutifully went to the nail salon at my hotel, and from now on, I will always show up with my Fabric nails. Good thing we picked a pretty decent color. So thanks so much for being here, guys. It's 8 in the morning in Vegas on day 3. I don't know who came up with the schedule. That was a bad call. We'll fix it for next year. Very excited that you're all here. It's our first community conference. You guys have heard this since Arun kicked us off. There is no question when we thought of putting this event together, and I think I see Kim Manis down there. Kim had quite a bit to do with this. You just never know. Are people going to come? We'll find out. And pretty pleased to say over 4,000 folks showed up to come and learn about everything that we're doing with this amazing product. So thank you for being here. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a break from the product stuff. Amir's tired. He can't do another demo to save his life. So we're going to pivot for a minute. I've been in the business for a couple of decades. I've done a lot of data projects in my time, and we all understand the importance of a data-driven culture, and we talk about insights and all those buzzwords, and I'm the marketing person, but I kind of hate. We're going to stop talking about product, and we're going to start talking about the data-driven culture. And the reason why we're doing that is, one, again, Amir's tired. But 2 is to try to connect everything that we're seeing in terms of the momentum, in terms of the reason that 4,000 people came to join us in Vegas on a conference that was not planned a year ago today, is because we do think that there's something unique happening in the market today. I think you've heard of AI. I think we've all heard about Gen AI. It's creating a new set of importance for data. So we like to say that data is the currency of Gen AI. And what do I mean by that? I'll tell you a story from our CEO summit, which we did last summer. So, a few months after ChatGPT had become a thing. And I was talking to the CEO of a large global insurance company. And he said, with all this Gen AI stuff, does that mean I can stop doing my data estate modernization project that I kind of feel like it's been going on for a while? I said, sorry, no. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. If anything, you should go faster, you should be more focused there, and you should feel really good about the investments you've made so far, because that's going to put you on a path to get to the Gen AI outcomes that you're looking for in a way that you wouldn't have if you hadn't gotten some handle around your data estate. And so that conversation is playing out over and over and over again. We're seeing this interesting shift in the IT space. I've been in IT for the last couple of decades. I think many of us in the room have. You guys would know what I mean by the cycle of convincing, which is IT tends to find these new opportunities, these new moments, these new technologies and capabilities, and then we go through the cycle of convincing. First, we've got to convince maybe the CIO, and then we got to go get that CFO to be willing to invest, and then you might get to the CEO, and you might even get to the board. And with Gen AI, it's absolutely the opposite. The pressure to go deliver this Gen AI capability is actually coming from the boardroom down into the organization, down into the IT team. And so I think we all are sitting in sort of the front row seat of being able to enable this opportunity for our organizations. So I think it is worth spending a little bit of time listening to folks who've been doing this for a while, like myself and others on the panel, to talk about how do we make data-driven culture happen in our organizations. What are some tips for getting there? And so with that, I'm very excited to welcome my speakers onto the stage. I think they're here. I saw them all backstage, so I had no doubt they were actually here. I wasn't too worried. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. So the folks that we have here on the panel all have decades of experience doing data-driven AI and analytics projects in their organizations. So we have 3 partners here participating with us. Thank you for being here. And we have Karthik from Microsoft, who actually led the data-driven transformation inside Microsoft before going over to work on that Microsoft Purview solution that we're all so excited about. So thanks for being here, guys. I'm not going to roll down every single speaker and ask the same question 4 times in a row because you guys are tired and you'll get bored, but I am going to ask each one of them to answer the first question, which is, let's just get on the same page with what we mean around a data-driven culture. So Karthik, I'm going to start with you. How would you define what a data-driven culture is? What does that mean?
It's a great question, and it's also one that has no uniform answer from what I've seen so far. For me, in very simplistic terms, a data-driven culture is one when the practitioners can truly look to data to tell them what they need to know and act, as opposed to using data just to prove what they think they have done and have achieved, right? So there's a tremendous sort of opportunity to apply data in ways that can help sort of open up the covers and show you things that you may not know, which can then influence how you shape your investments and your strategies.
Got it. Clemens?
So data-driven culture is definitely about data, the governance of the data, and you need to add the business to it. Business needs to be accountable for their own data, because then they can really act on it. And that's some nice examples are there. For example, when an organization wants to go to net zero, that's really the business domains need to take ownership of that data, because then they can take the advantage of it and be really the differentiating around that one. So that's, for me, data-driven culture. It's really the change and the change in mindset to really get that action done there. Later this afternoon, by the way, my colleagues will do a session around this. So please join us there. And
thank you. Diego?
For me, it has 3 key enablers. One is that it has to start at the top. So it's the management team who has to set the tone and say that the organization is going to drive with data, transparency, and really use that data for decision making. I think the second one is that you have to have the right platform. With the explosion of AI, you are going to have more and more data coming, more and more requests from the business, and they are going to be faster and faster. So you need to have Fabric there at the center to help support that. And I think the third one is really the data marketplace. How do you have a solution, a capability that is enabling the business to get to the right data fast enough to get to the right answers? We think that in order to be successful on those three, you have to maybe do an upskilling initiative across your organization from top to bottom, and that is going to set up you for success from an ability to capture innovation faster and have a competitive advantage.
Makes sense, yep. Hugh, you want to close this out?
Those are good points. I would just say the way I think of data-driven culture is when people at all levels of an organization are using data to create insights that matter and make decisions and drive actions across the business. And we recognize it in two ways usually. One is that everyone at all levels recognizes that they have a role in creating data and that they have a need to use data to make decisions. And I worked with a health system, a health provider network, and it really wasn't until the individuals at the front lines were working with data stewards and thinking about how this data that they collect from patients makes such an impact on their whole health system, and also their role in using those insights themselves across the operations. And that's where the patient experience, the business value really began to transform. And it's an exciting time when companies can do that. They can really unlock value that they didn't realize was there before.
Yeah. I think on average, the data estate modernization and analytics projects that I've worked on over the last couple of decades, sometimes it's like 2 years before you're starting to see something come out of the other side. And it took a certain amount of grit to just say, nope, I believe in this vision and we're going to get there. I will say we're starting to see that timeline shift a bit. It's getting faster and shorter. I think agile software development actually had a lot to do with that. We all kind of got into a different mindset of what it took to ship it. But also with the introduction of Gen AI, there's a more natural language conversation. So when you take a solution like Fabric, which I think we're already seeing customers go much faster with their transformations than they used to when they use Fabric, and then you add that to I just want to have a conversation with my data, it gets quite simple. So I'm going to transition to Diego. Diego, I'd love for you, since you've got quite a bit of experience doing these projects with customers, give us some hope. Talk about some of the great outcomes that you've seen as a result of putting the effort in.
Yeah, really appreciate that question. So I think doing your homework pays back, definitely. I have a client in renewables that they are in a growth trajectory. They're expecting to grow costs for $1 billion in the next couple of years. And what they said, they had their house in order, they have all the right pieces in place, and what they are expecting to do, the target they have set is to save $200 million by adoption of AI and Gen AI through their processes. So I think that's 20%, and that's fascinating.
Yeah. We, as we were preparing for our big conference back in the fall, Microsoft Ignite, we knew that organizations were trying to assess what's the ROI on all this Gen AI capability. Like, show us the money, show us the math. So we worked with IDC and a few other organizations to try to get our arms around what is the ROI that our customers are starting to see. And the stats were pretty astounding. For every $3.50 invested in generative AI, there was $1 back on ROI. That's an amazing return. And then the other thing that came through was the speed. Again, these projects are getting shorter, they're getting more achievable, and the average from idea to production was less than 12 months, which, again, if you've been doing data projects for a while, you would know less than 12 months was just a pipe dream about 10 years ago. So, all right, so I'm going to transition to Hugh.
Yeah.
I think there's something called the era of AI happening. Would you agree?
I would. I
know we're a little tired of hearing about it. There's somebody trolling me on LinkedIn about it right now. That's okay. I will say, as somebody who was sitting in the front row when we brought ChatGPT and Azure OpenAI service to market last year, there was definitely a question, is this a hype cycle? Is this another thing that is going to turn out to be nothing, and it's just a bunch of IT people running around talking about something that's not going to matter? That lasted for 3 or 4 months, right? And then the conversations by the spring had shifted completely, and that's where I say we got out of the cycle of convincing and into the I'm really excited about this. Please help us go faster. So I think we're squarely out of the it might be hype. And we would say, absolutely entered into this era of AI. So given that, if you agree, and I think you do, he said yes yesterday in rehearsal, how does the emergence of Gen AI impact the way organizations should think about their data strategy?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest change right now is the level of attention on AI and data is unlike anything we've seen before. 5 years ago, 2 years ago, this was happening in the basement. AI was happening, data engineering was happening in the basement. Now it's happening in the boardroom. We have CEOs and board members driving AI, driving the AI agenda. And I echo what Diego said earlier. There are use cases that we've seen deliver $200 million in value, but it wasn't because of the machine learning model by itself. It was because the change management team, the data scientists, the data engineers, the operations team were working together to really drive adoption of that use case. And that's really where the transformation happens. In terms of strategy, we surveyed our leading AI engineers and data scientists and said, what do you need from data to make it useful, to do AI, to do generative AI? And they ultimately gave us 7 characteristics of data that helps them do AI. Things like being visible, being relevant, being recent. And these characteristics are really what allows data to be AI ready. And I think that is a super important thing right now, is to invest in AI-ready data, not just AI. And I think a lot of companies right now are at a little bit of risk that they're over-investing in AI, but they need to also at least equally invest in data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to add on a little bit to that.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I think +1 to everything Hugh just said. Look, at the end of the day, your AI is only as good as your data, right? To get your AI great, you got to first focus on getting your data to be really great. And if anything, Gen AI has just expanded out the blast radius and the attack vectors for your data, despite all the goodness that it's going to bring along with it. So the traditional practices of data management, the need to get them right and scale them further has only increased, not decreased. For instance, if you took something as tactical as data quality management, historically the focus has been on things like ensuring data completeness, accuracy, consistency, and so on. But now, data quality has to think about really hard problems, like bias detection, infringement detection, data poisoning detection, right? So none of those traditional data management practices go away. In fact, you got to think about hardening them further to really get your data ready for the age of AI.
Yeah, it's a great point. So Clemens, maybe I'll come over to you. How do you think that organizations should be balancing the need for the data-driven decision-making that we're all talking about with the intuition and experience of a team?
So definitely, intuition you can't capture in data, but you can make intuition much better when you have correct data, when you have good data. And that's what you see happening, is that people starting to understand better and better how their organization work, how their businesses work, by giving them the right data. But then also their intuition improves immediately. And there you get interesting insights in areas where you never have expected that maybe your data was incorrect, but now actually by accident it is correct actually. And you had a very nice example yesterday from Microsoft. Huh? That's,
I think he wants to share your example.
Share my example? Absolutely. Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, any new innovation in the industry, if it waits for all the data to become apparent before the innovation progresses, there won't be any innovation. So you have to have a balance between, I would say, using your gut instinct and then being able to apply data to constantly validate your gut instinct, right? And I think you can't wait for all the data to start making progress. You make the progress, you apply the data, you decide whether you want to pivot, persevere, or fail fast, and you should let data sort of guide you through that journey. So the example that I shared yesterday was our own internal journey, and this was when I led the marketing technology team at Microsoft, where we used to run a whole bunch of retention campaigns, trying to grow the user sort of like engagement and retention with our products. And we used to run these campaigns using very sort of static journey paths that our marketers would define for our products and would believe that it's the way to nurture the customer. But when we looked at the actual data, we noticed that our customers were taking very different journey paths through the product and through all the various experiences. This then got us back to the drawing table to look at that data and to really understand what customers were actually navigating versus what we thought they were navigating, and then apply that learning to tune our campaigns and get to a much better sort of like user engagement outcomes, right? So always knowing how to take a first step and then applying data to make sure that you're taking the next steps the way they should be taken is kind of what I would recommend.
Yeah, I would just add to that, in terms of experience and intuition versus data-driven decisioning, I worked with a client in agriculture around demand forecasting and integrated business planning, and the combination of using their experience and their data to make decisions was really powerful, and it removed bias. So there was a lot of bias in terms of repetitive analytics and assuming that what happened in the past will happen in the future. It also frees up time, and using data analytics to accelerate the time to get the insight allows you to actually spend time using your experience, using your intuition to make decisions. And otherwise, the example I had was they had a 30-day forecast that they had to create every 30 days, but it would take about 30 days to create the forecast. And so they would have, half a day to think about it, and then they'd submit it. And, now they have 25 days to think about it and do different scenarios, and it's a much, much better process for everyone.
I just think, on top of what you said, that there's an opportunity to gamify some of these things. So with more AI models, like you can really compare to a lifelong experience in a field. Sometimes power trading is like, why this model is going to give me a better recommendation than what I would say, right? So if you can gamify and give an opportunity to the human in the loop to kind of override the decision of the model, if they really think that's theirs is better, and have some reward in case that they are better, and put it again as an input for the model, and in case theirs is not better, it's an organic buy-in for the process. So I think that's an interesting angle.
We like to gamify anything we possibly can. It's always going to make things go smoother. So basically, Karthik fixed the emails that you're all getting all day long from marketing. Thank you, Karthik. I got some marketing friends sitting in the front row here. And then I think we finally helped out that very, very busy ETL team. I think the ETL team might be the busiest team in the data world. And so that's why it would take 30 days roughly to produce a 30-day report. And I'm not going to pitch Fabric again, but I think there's a reason why there's a lot of excitement about what's happening in Fabric with regards to improving the time it takes to generate those reports. All right, so before we close, let's shift just slightly. They kind of hated this question, y'all, but we're just going to do it anyways. I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity on behalf of the room to ask you guys to share if you had something you could tell your early in career self about what you were going to go do with this career journey in data, what would it be?
Yeah, this is an easy one for me, and I talk about this with my boys, 15 and 11, almost every single day now, which is learning to truly appreciate the journey even more than the destination, right? And sometimes when I look back at my early years, I used to be so focused on trying to get to a certain target, oftentimes overlooking the importance of the journey that you got to traverse, taking people along the journey with you. And the biggest takeaway that I had is the importance of the journey. And appreciating that sometimes the destination or the target might be different at the end of it, and that's okay, because the learnings you got from the journey is more valuable than anything else. That's
great. Clemens?
A very cool one. I really like that one. So I've got two. One is take your vacations. It's that easy. But we are living in...
That's worth applause.
We are living in such a cool technology. I remember I take always those big books with me on vacation to continuously study. But now I would say, okay, leave that behind and really enjoy your vacation. Around data and AI, I really would recommend myself to immediately focus on the reliability of your solution. Don't go into your demos with not good data, not trusted data. Build the solutions what the business immediately wants so that your reliable AI solutions really can scale in the enterprise. And that's what I definitely see. Don't end up in the demo debt valley. That's what I always love to say.
It's a good one.
The one that sticks with me is really, how do you define success for a data analytics AI project? At the beginning, I thought it was about building the coolest, most optimized data platform, or the most beautiful dashboard, or the accurate kind of machine learning model. But I think that's nothing if really the business doesn't adopt it and doesn't use it to change the way they operate to improve. So the way I think you can do that is really approaching those data initiatives from a use case-driven, business-centric approach. So really identify those use cases, prioritize them with them, align them to their objectives, and then start delivering incrementally and providing value early and often. That demo can be like a quarterly stuff and have an MVP, but then you have to finish it. It has to go to production, right? So if you can keep the business engaged in those 2-3 year kind of big transformation projects, I think that gets you closer to success.
I couldn't agree more. That breakthrough where we all realized it wasn't work on it for 2 years until you take a whole weekend, take everything down and ship it and cross your fingers like this, it was a game changer. Hugh, you want to close this out?
Sure. Well, if I could tell myself something 20 years ago, it would be to buy real estate in Colorado, where I live. But unfortunately,
he's from Colorado.
I didn't take that note back then. No, in all seriousness, I would say, trust is really important. And I think, personally, I'm an analytic personality. I like to be accurate and make decisions and use data. But building trust and building relationships is just as important, if not more important, than anything that we do as leaders. And I think making sure you focus on that, making sure you build those relationships, build that trust, and also focus on doing the right thing, finding the right insights. The balance is so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me my Oprah moment. It's real fun. I don't have anything to offer you guys in the way of vehicles. I'm so sorry. But hopefully you did take something great away from this conversation. Don't worry, we're going to go right back to the product stuff right after we get off the stage. But we did think it was worth just spending a little bit of time together this morning, letting the coffee sink in, and hearing from some incredible folks who have really been on this data-driven culture journey for a couple of decades now. And I think we're all feeling like the moment is now. Gen AI has shown up. It has created incredible momentum for what we are all focused on as data professionals. And we're just so grateful that you, again, all decided to join us here in Las Vegas for FabCon.
One more time.